Welcome, everyone, to our series of Togetherly, where we bring you insights from experts dedicated to helping parents and caregivers of struggling teens and young adults. We will be recording this session so that we can share it to our site and elsewhere. And today, we are honored to have Casey Seidenberg, who is a wonderful woman I happen to know for many years, and a terrific friend, terrific mother, an amazing person. She's got over 20 years experience in marketing communications, but really focused on both empowering adults and young adults and children in her coaching practice. So we are absolutely thrilled to have Casey. She works she has a certification in integrative nutrition, works today with an amazing nonprofit called Human Better EDU, which provides services to students and educational institutions of all shapes and sizes. Casey teaches in schools, working with teens and adults and helping teens boost their mental wellness and healthy development. So with that, welcome, Casey, and thank you for joining us today. We are thrilled to have you.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. I love what you're doing and the space that you're creating for kids and parents. So I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. And just quickly, as my own introduction, I'm Jeff Sawatsky. I'm the CEO and founder of Togetherly, and we're a platform for parents with and caregivers of struggling teens and young adults. And my partner, Catherine Weymouth, is on the call today as well. So with that, why don't we get going? Today, Casey, we're focused on self-worth in teenagers, which I think is such an important topic. What do you believe are the most significant factors that impact a young person's sense of self-worth?
It's a great question. There's three things that I want to talk about. One, I really want to talk about today, but before I even do anything, I kind of want to talk about the difference between self-confidence and self-worth, because they're actually very different. And I think it's important. So self-confidence is what you show on the outside, right? It's fragile. It can fluctuate just based on anything that's happening in your outside world, right? So let's say you have an accomplishment. Let's say you have a failure. You got invited somewhere. You got a bad grade, whatever it is. All of those things affect our self-confidence. And those people who seem super self-confident on the outside, but maybe aren't on the inside, that's because their self-confidence is projected outward, but the self-worth, which is what you feel on the inside, which is what I love to coach on. It is generally our innate belief that we're worthy exactly as we are. And the only people that can build that up are ourselves. And the only people who can break it down are ourselves. And so I love to work with teens on that, because when a teenager's self-worth grows, like, it doesn't matter what hits them from all over outside, they still stay strong. And so I often actually like to call self-worth like a foundation and a ceiling. So we're only as solid as, our self-worth is underneath us. And we can only rise as high as our self-worth goes as our ceiling. Like, low self-worth is kind of like a roof right over your head, and it keeps you limited. So I just wanted to say that first, but back to your question. So there's three main ways when I work with kids that I really work on building their self-worth. So the first one, which we can do a whole nother section on, we're not going to talk about today, but is how to manage their negative self-talk. The second one is working with them to flip limiting beliefs that they have about themselves. We can literally do another session on that one, because that one's a great one too. But today, the one I want to talk about, which is always where I start, is teaching kids to keep promises to themselves about things that matter to them, so that they actually learn to trust themselves again. And I'll just clarify that for a second. But if you think about it, when we keep even really small promises to ourselves every day or every week, like I said, even about the tiniest thing, we prove to ourselves that we're worth following through for, right? And that's huge if we started to believe that we're actually the type of person who cannot follow through or is not worth fighting for. And, if you think about yourself, like, when you're accountable to yourself, you start to feel more competent, right? And that you actually have some agency in your life. And that's really important for these kids, to feel like they have some ability to further or push their lives forward, because I think a lot of them have felt so out of control for so long.
Yes, that's tremendously helpful. I mean,
Casey, I love
it applies
that.
to.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Casey.
All right. No, I was just going to say, can you follow up with some examples of promises that kids, and I assume it varies based on their age, but that promises that they might keep and how a parent can work with them on that?
Yeah, I think that's actually a great way to get tangible. So I'll start by saying, think about, have you guys ever noticed, and I'm going to ask you too, like this is not just for kids, but do you notice that you're really good at keeping promises to someone else? Like if you have a deadline or you're meeting a friend, you're not going to just blow it off without calling and canceling and having some reason, right? But how often have you blown off exercise, eating well, going to bed on time, staying off social media, like anything that you're promising yourself, I'm going to do this because it's going to make my life better, right? We are so good at blowing that off. And, you know, so the reason I have these kids start to create promises, which I'll give you some examples in a minute, but is they don't realize that or we don't even realize that when we actually blow these things off and think, oh, who am I really hurting by actually not exercising or not starting my homework on time or not getting off video games and going to bed? Like we're not hurting anybody, but what we actually are hurting our relationship with ourselves. And so just think about it. If you blew off a friend 10 times in a row without ever calling, would they trust you? No. I mean, no way. So why should we trust ourselves when we blow ourselves off over and over again? And so when I have kids make promises and adults too, and like when we're coaching C-suite executives, like we actually use this exact same framework. Like I have all of our C-suite, all of our executives, all of our leadership team, all the way through middle school, like every age group, we have the same structure of let's figure out what's the dream. Like, what is it that you're trying to go after? Are you trying to get more sleep? Are you trying to be more organized? These are kids examples or adult examples, I guess.
Yeah.
But, you know, what is it that do you want to get off social media because you know it's damaging for you? So then what would be a promise, like a specific measurable thing that you could do every day that could get you closer to that? And so that could be, maybe you want to be more organized. So I pack my backpack before bed every night so I'm more organized in the morning. Like it could be as small as that. It could be that you don't get any tech, you don't get on video games until you've done your homework. You know, anything that's going to get you closer. And, you know, from an executive standpoint, that applies too. Like, I actually need to go connect with everybody on my team once a week. Like, that could be a promise if you're maybe working on your leadership or your team building. And so, creating these measurable promises are so important. And we actually have a worksheet that I'd love to share with you guys if you guys want to pass on to the community, because we use it for middle and high school. We have a different version for adults, but it's great because it has everything I'm about to talk about with promises. I'm going to get into a structure for keeping your promises that it has, but it has like studies have shown that if we check things off and actually see our progress, we're more likely to want to keep checking things off and keep progressing. And so it is actually really important to have these kids or adults like look at each week and see these physical check marks. And it can be digital, like we can use it digitally, you can use it print out. But seeing your progress, you start to actually believe, oh my gosh, I'm showing up for myself. Like I just did this for 3 days. I can do it for 3 more. And it's psychology. And so, you know, that's why we want these promises to be measurable, that they can, you know, confidently say, yes, I packed my backpack. You know, yes, I stayed off social media until what time, but we also want them to actually be able to track them. And so I didn't give you an example, Catherine, that was actually your question.
No, you did, like the backpack thing, but can we even go back a step further? Like, how do you start the conversation? Because I know certainly in my experience, I sometimes end up being the nagging mom. Like, I would like you to clean your room. I'm sick of you losing things at school. How do you help kids take ownership for their own tasks?
You know, I wish I had the perfect answer for that, but the answer I have is this. This does not necessarily work if it's just a parent imposed
Right.
promise.
Because then it's things I want them to do, not things they want to do.
Yes. So like their dream might not be to have a clean room or, you know, to even brush their teeth, right? Like my teenage boys, I'm like, really? We don't brush our teeth every day? What? But you know, that might not be their dream. So a parent imposed dream of clean room is not going to work in this situation. This is something that has to come from within them that they care about. Because what we're trying to teach them is self-accountability. So accountability to you is a totally different subject and super important, but that's not self-accountability. We're trying to have them show up for themselves, and so that they can show themselves that they're worth showing up for. So it really needs to be something that they care about. And so, you know, I love this. I love this as a game. And we do this again with all levels. Like if you can make this a little bit of a game, it makes it more fun. Like everybody likes a game.
Absolutely.
And, you know, so when I'm going to give an example of myself and my kids. So when I was trying to teach this to them, and I was really learning it for the first time myself, and I'm not proud of this, but I was a huge yeller, like a huge yeller as a kid when my boys were little. They're in college now and I have a middle school girl. But when the boys were little, oh my God. I mean, I could just lose it, right? And I wasn't
Good to hear that from a parent coach so that we all know
Yes.
we are not perfect.
right. No, I mean, nobody's perfect. And, but it was something that was really bothering me because I was doing it a lot. And I was shaming myself afterwards. I knew it wasn't getting the results I wanted or the relationship that I wanted with my boys, you know. So somewhere around age 10 or 11, I decided that that was something I wanted to work on for myself. So my own self-improvement. And so I said to them, hey, listen, this is not making me feel great. It's not making you feel great. I am human and I'm going to try to work on this. And this is how I'm going to do it. I'm making a promise that I am not going to scream at you. And if I do, I owe you $5. And I chose $5. And so that's the incentive I'm going to get to. Like if I mess up, I have to pay an incentive. It's not a consequence because it's not necessarily like painful. But what it does is it gave me and these kids who do this, it gives you a second chance. We're all going to blow it sometimes.
Yeah.
Like I haven't yelled in years, but it took me a year to break this habit.
And then they love it because they get paid.
Right. And that's the beauty.
And no yelling.
Yeah, no yelling. And they would sit there and I'd start, like, you'd see my voice start to raise and they could see me get mad. And I'd see their little faces and they're like, oh my God, we're getting money. Mom's about to pay. You know, and like I would see that and my anger would start to dissipate because partially I was very conscious of I didn't want them to just be given money, right? Like I wanted them at age 12 to get jobs and learn that. So the idea of giving them money all the time was painful to me, but they were thrilled. And so here was a promise, I'm not going to yell, an incentive to keep my promise. If I do yell, I have to pay them $5. And so I would have that in my head. I don't want to pay them $5. I want to pay, calm down, Casey, calm down. I don't want to pay them $5, right? And what it does is it reminds you in the moment of a behavior that you don't want to be doing this behavior because you're remembering that there's an incentive attached to keep that behavior. And so the best incentives are ones that either help another area of your life or help, in my case, the relationship that you're working on. You know, so an example that a lot of the high school kids I have, they actually want to be better to their parents and they want to help out around the house, even though they never want to do the dishwasher in the moment or take the garbage out. But they don't want to be that kid that's driving their parents crazy. And so a lot of times what I'll do is have kids and parents get in the game together, just like I did with my kids. And they each had something they were working on too, like starting their homework earlier, going to bed earlier. And we were in the game together. And if a high schooler has a consequence that they have to do a chore or an incentive that they have to do a chore for their parent, you know, that it's like this circle, right? So they are actually feeling better about themselves, even if they miss their promise.
Yeah.
If they still follow through with that incentive of the chore, then they've actually still shown up for themselves and they can still trust themselves and they've built up their relationship with their parent instead of hurting it. Does that make sense?
Totally. And I want to pick up on that. Like the other day when we spoke, you were talking about the impact of self-worth. So like you were talking about if you're always the person who's late, you think of yourself as, oh, well, I'm always the person who's late. So can you talk a little bit about if they can come up with whatever the things that they want to do are and they can do them, how that changes them?
Yeah. So I think it's really a lot of these kids. I'm so glad you asked that because teenagers in general, but especially struggling teenagers, tend to have pretty negative beliefs about themselves, you know, and so they believe they aren't all that worthy, which is why I love working on self-worth. They believe they're not the type to follow through. They are the type to mess up. They're the type to say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, make the wrong choice, whatever it is. And really good behavior change, effective behavior change has been studied that when we can ground it in the idea of, I'm the type of person who, okay?
Mhm.
So not I'm the type of person who messes up all the time, which is what a lot of them think, but
Yes.
I'm the type of person who makes their bed, exercises, is a good friend, hands in my assignments on time. Like it doesn't matter what it is, but when we can start to attach it to their beliefs about themselves and to their identity, they're more likely to follow through even when it's hard, because it's not just, okay, I'm going to go to bed earlier. It's I'm the type of person that goes to bed early. And, you know, teenagers might not like that one, but I'm the type of person who practices basketball every day because I want to make the team.
Yeah.
That's a lot more powerful than I'm just going to go practice basketball.
Right.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it makes me think sometimes, especially when you have multiple children, as a parent, you almost can't help but you have them a little bit categorized in your mind. You know, that's my
Right.
youngest who always forgets to hand in his homework or who's always losing things. So I don't know if you've thought about how, as a parent, you have to try to open your aperture a little bit and not just have your kid pigeonholed so that they have some room to show you, like, I am capable of doing this, but you gotta not assume that I'm gonna lose it.
Yeah. And I think, you know, you asked a question a little bit before. We talked about how parents can help. And I think that's really important, is to open the aperture and then also model for them that it's possible to change as a human. Because I think that a lot of us get stuck in our bad behaviors and then they become identity, as we were talking about. And that's harder to break. But if you can model that, like, hey, I used to be a person who was always late and I worked on this. I used to be a yeller and I worked in it. And now I'm not a yeller and I'm never late, right? You're showing them that as humans, we can always evolve, because I think a lot of them really feel stuck in their identity as struggling.
Yeah.
And so to understand that no matter where you're coming from, there is not a behavior or a personality trait or anything that we cannot evolve, right? Some are easier than others, but in general, we can evolve parts of ourselves. And I really don't like some of those personality tests that say you're a 1 or a 7, or, you know, it's nice to understand that you have a predisposition, because we
Yes.
all do. But I really believe, and I've witnessed hundreds of people be able to evolve personality traits and parts of them so that they can show up in the world in a way that makes them feel more proud. And I think that is hugely important for these kids who are struggling and think of themselves as that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
awesome.
Casey, I think that's so powerful, and that resonates so much with me. I wonder if you could talk about how this could apply specifically to some of the parents in our communities who, are having to deal with sending their child. You got to the point where you need to send the child outside the home to a residential treatment facility or to a wilderness program, or take those more drastic steps where you have to say and process to yourself as a parent, and that, geez, we need resources outside of the home to handle this situation. There's a lot of emotions and feelings that come with that. And then also trying to help the child navigate that process. I wonder if you have any thoughts on how these types of paradigms can help in those situations.
Yeah, I do, for both the parents and for the kids who are going off into these situations. I think I would say the same thing to both of them. I would start by, what do you want the outcome to be? So I'm going to start with the kids. For them, like, whether they want to be there or not, if they can get to the point of, what do I want if I'm going to be here? What do I want the outcome to be? And it doesn't have to be some dramatic thing. It could be that I learned about myself, that I feel a little bit better about myself, that I work on my negative self-talk and feel more capable. I mean, it doesn't have to be those types of things. It could be that I start taking care of myself better. I drink more water and I sleep more because I haven't been taking care of myself because I haven't thought I was worthy. It doesn't matter, but if they can attach to any kind of outcome or purpose for being there, goal, dream, whatever you want to call it, North Star, like sometimes I call it like the GPS direction, like, where do you want to go? What's the end at the end of this? How do you want to feel? And what do you want to have gotten out of this. And again, just like I said with promises, we can start tiny. Like it doesn't have to be some, I am a dramatically different person.
Right.
And so if they can do that, even in the smallest way, and then think about what are some actions that I would take every week while I'm there, while I'm on the wilderness trip or I'm in, the outpatient clinic, what would I do every week that would get me to that outcome? Like, what is it that would help me? And then give them that chart and have them start tracking because they'll start feeling better. And so I think that is what I would say, just to get
Yep.
them. It's a little bit like what we said before, is it needs to come from them.
Yeah.
So they need to decide what that outcome is. It doesn't have to be what the outcome that you want, but if they can attach to something, they're more likely to go through it in an intentional manner. And then for parents,
Yeah, go ahead.
I would just say the same thing, right? And it's a little different. You're not maybe as a parent saying, what do I want the outcome to be? Because you can't necessarily impact that as much, but what do I want to be? What kind of parent do I want to be? How do I want to show up? What does that look like? And I would get them to write down, I am calm. I am, whatever it is that they want to be through this process. And for their child, I would get them to write that down as, again, the dream, the goal, the outcome, the North Star. And then what are the actions that they need to take during that period to show up that way? Because they're going to feel, any parent will feel a little bit more intentional if they're actually taking cognitive choice steps every week to be something and show up as their best self. And so I just think that will give them some empowerment, because these kids and these parents, as you know, feel really out of control. There's a lot of out of feelings of lack of agency. So the minute we can give either the kids or the parents a little bit more agency and feeling like they're driving the bus a little bit more, that's just powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the example you gave earlier about you yelling, because I love the idea of the parents doing it with the kids. So they might be totally different goals, but everybody's working on something. And so whether your kid is in residential treatment and away, or even at home, and you say, okay, I'm working on these things, you're working on these, it seems like a really nice way of holding each other accountable and feeling like it's not just, I think Jeff and I have talked a lot about, sometimes when you send your kids away, there's sometimes a feeling from the parents of like, oh, you're going to get fixed and then you're going to come back. But then you realize I, as a parent, have to interact with you in a different way when you come back. I have to assume that you've learned and matured and give you a chance. And so I think that was very cool.
Yeah. And I think that I love how you just said that, because we all need to be fixed at times, or always. And it doesn't even have to be fixed. We all have evolution and growth and learning. And so I think when the kids can see that you don't think you're perfect and they're faulty, I
Right.
actually think that's a really powerful dynamic to flip, or just change a little.
No, very much so. You used to yell, I used to smoke, and my kids
Yeah.
would freak out. And, I quit and they watched me do it. And yes.
Yeah. It's really
Um,
powerful.
so whether it's wilderness or kids who are at home and in school, can you talk a little bit about the role that educators and the people in whatever setting they're in can play with self-worth?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question, because at Human Better EDU, that's what we're doing. So we're really either empowering the educators themselves, the administrators, the teachers, or we're teaching the students. And because kids spend a lot of time in school, and schools have been very difficult places in the last couple of years, for lots of reasons, many years, but especially since COVID. And the more, what I'm fascinated by, and I'm sure you guys have felt this, we're teaching math and we're teaching science and all these tangible subjects, but we're not actually teaching these kids how to be human, right?
Yeah.
And the skills and the tools that they need to navigate humanity and life. And all of those things are missing from our school curriculum. And so I think, and school is such a like I always think of it as a container. Like it's a container that these kids are in. And if it's safe, and if it's supportive, and if it allows them to make mistakes with learning and helps get them through, like that's a really great container. And it's not always a great container. So the more that we can empower the educators, you know, to really feel good in their own lives. So we actually we just coach a lot of educators just on being happier in their own lives, nothing about the kids. And there's actually a really big study by the Marriott Foundation. I think that they conducted it, but they basically found that just giving teachers therapy was on their own lives, nothing to do with the kids in the classroom, had a much bigger impact on the kids than a lot of the programs in the schools for kids. Because
which makes total sense, right? Because then it's how they show up and it's what you do as an executive. If you get your own coach, you are going to be a better executive, right?
and it just trickles down. And I think the other piece I'll say is the way I like to think about our curriculum that we bring into school and just all the stuff that you and I we're all talking about right now is it's all asset-based tools, not deficit-based tools. And there's nothing like there are tons of tools out there for deficit-based. And you know, and that those definitions, right, are dealing, or the deficit-based is when there's already a problem. How do we go after it versus asset-based? How do we teach tools to build resilience and to help kids get through hard times so that more significant problems haven't already been created? And that's a lot of what we teach. It's accountability to yourself, it's self-worth, you know, communication skills. So you are actually understanding your own feelings and knowing how to communicate them. All of those different skills, which I think are incredibly important, again, whether you're an executive or you're in middle school. But if we could teach them all starting in kindergarten, that would be amazing.
I love what you
Do you
said.
have any
about
further
being
sort of
asset focused rather than deficit focused. Sorry, Jeff.
Or no, go ahead. I was just going to say, I mean, I think you just mentioned a few resources, and obviously Human Better or EDU. If there's any other, you know, resources you think for parents to on this topic, because I think this has been so amazing and helpful.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, the one thing I'll say that has worked really well, and this is 100% a plug for Human Better EDU, but you know, we do offer parent coaching for parents of struggling teens. And I think sometimes you just need a one-on-one. I think what you're doing in this group setting is phenomenal, because when you understand that this is normalized and you have other people have gone through this and you can get advice. And I have a child who was born mostly deaf, and you know, finding that community of other people who have navigated this was so important to me. And but then also sometimes you just need that person who's not your spouse, right?
Yep.
Or not, you can't always share everything with your friends or family. And so if you can find that person who you can get it out to, and then they can help you figure out in your particular situation how to do something about it. Because when we're we can't stay in the upset as wholly when we're in action. We might still be upset, but when you're starting to take action forward, you're moving away from whatever the past was or what the upset was. So that's a lot of our coaching is, okay, this has happened. This is a situation. How do we get you feeling this much better, or moving forward this much, and then this much, and then. So, I mean, I think for parents that would be, and it doesn't have to be us, there's phenomenal coaches across the country, but I think someone who can help, that's one thing. And then we do a lot of teen coaching too.
Okay.
Is it mostly one-to-one or in a group setting?
We do both. We do both. We do group parents, individual. We do kids. We do either do kids in schools. We also do after school programs. If anybody wants to actually create a group, we've had lots of people come and say, hey, I have 10 kids. They're all friends, or, you know, can we get a group together? So really any which way.
Well, Casey, I have to say, I think it's so inspiring to have you, and you know, struggling teens or not, I think this is just so helpful for parents and anyone, quite frankly. I love this framework that you've set up. And, you know, Catherine and I founded this platform really based on our own personal experiences. And I love the notion that you've set up of defining it as, you know, the innate belief we are worth existing as we are is so powerful. And particularly in the context of when you have a teen or a young adult who's struggling. There's so many associations and emotions that come with that, of shame or guilt or this and that, as you process that journey. And it's very easy to just, give 110% of your effort to your child, and forget that not only is it, beneficial, but it's essential that you also take care of yourself and maintain yourself. And because I think one of the things that I've found is, their children can only really heal to the level of their healthiest parent. And if you let yourself kind of start degrading your self-worth in that process, ironically, you're sort of impeding the wellness and benefit and growth and healing of your child as well. So I think that's such a profound thing. Just that statement, and teaching kids to keep promises to themselves, the difference between self-worth, self-confidence is so powerful, and then taking it down to specifics of measurable promises. I'm going to steal that phrase and use that to remind myself mainly, for both Togetherly, and for and for my family. And just asking ourselves the question of what kind of parent we want to be. I think this has been really profound. I know I personally can't wait to continue these conversations with you. I think it's been amazing.
Yeah.
You've given me a lot of inspiration and a lot to think about. And I'm sure our parents will find that, and caregivers will find that as well. So thank you so incredibly much. We really hope we can continue on conversations on other topics. I can't wait. I kind of want to keep doing them already, but we will schedule them for another time. But thank you so very much. You've been incredible.
Well, thank you guys so much. And I am here. I would love to do as many as you want to do. I could talk about this stuff forever. So
Awesome.
Super.